what really is DEI?
Vice President Kamala Harris has picked Minnesota Governor Tim Walz to be her running mate.
Whoa, look at that. Now this is crazy. Look how white this is. It looks like it's practically glowing. This is the whitest thing I've ever seen.
DEI.
There's this push and messaging by Kamala supporters that she'll somehow be different than Biden when it comes to Gaza. And you were saying that you don't think that's true, but there is that push in the media, isn't there?
Rhetorically, she's slightly different from Biden. But remember, Biden finally woke up after a few months and expressed rather tepid concern for the civilians of Gaza. Well, if they're that concerned about the slaughter of the Palestinians, why don't they stop arming them? That will never happen. I mean, obviously, she is using the rhetoric of empathy or compassion as a mask to continue arming and supporting the Israeli genocide. I mean, remember, she also, in that statement, talked about Israel's right to defend itself. So, no, the rhetoric changes. I mean, if you want to be fooled by that, that's your business. But rhetorical statements are kind of meaningless given the quantity of weapons, including 2,000-pound bunker buster bombs and F-35s and everything else that we're unloading onto Israel, so it can continue the slaughter. And Israel is talking about this genocide continuing in terms of active military assaults until the end of this year.
I mean, is it even possible for her to distance herself from Biden's Gaza policy?
That would presume that she wants to, and she doesn't. So, no, there's zero change. I mean, first of all, it's Congress that controls. It's Congress that allocates the money. And as we saw with Netanyahu's speech, these people are completely captive to the Israel lobby.
And I want to ask you the question that I'm sure you always get, which is, won't Trump be worse?
I don't care. I also don't know what's worse than what Biden is doing. I mean, what can possibly be worse than genocide? Than besieging 2.5 million people in a tiny, densely populated place, and then bombing the hell out of them. And then sending billions upon billions upon billions every month. More and more billions are going to this monstrosity to continue this genocide. I think what's worse than Trump is for the American people to go to the ballot box and vote for somebody who did this in broad daylight and say, this is okay. We will always fall into line as long as you give us a choice between two war criminals and we have to decide which one is worse than the other. That's worse.
I was there 9 days after. Sent pictures of tying a mother and a daughter in a rope, pouring kerosene on them, burning them, and watching as they died.
And here's the Washington Post reporting. A White House spokesperson later clarified that U.S. officials and the president have not seen pictures of confirmed such reports. Independently, the president based his comments about the alleged atrocities on the claims from Netanyahu's spokesman and media reports from Israel, according to the White House.
I mean, it's unbelievable. They've already had to admit that he did not see any photos, that the initial claim was a lie. And now we're talking about 7 months later, he's still lying about it. We have two liars.
Two pathological liars.
Two of the most obscene liars the
Right.
presidential contest has ever. I mean, everyone lies if you're a politician. Yeah. But these two really are off the charts.
Well, you know what they say, Aaron, representation matters, and it's important for pathological liars to know that they too can be president.
You have family in Gaza, your wife's family, your in-laws are there, right?
Yes.
And tell me, can you talk to them?
No, I mean, I've been touring, so it's been difficult. It's been difficult enough for them to be in touch with my wife and her family. But the thing is, they have like many families there, like cousins and uncles, and they're all left their houses in Khan Yunis and Gaza and northern Gaza. And now they are in one apartment, in one building in Rafah, sharing it with 25 other families. And, at any moment we can hear a bomb drop. But it's okay because Israel will apologize, I'm sure, as they usually do. I mean, I was so happy to listen to their sincere apology for killing the people from Central Kitchen. Oh my God, the pain that they have to go through. I mean, even one of their spokesmen tweeted on Twitter, it's see what Hamas made me do. It is so interesting. And the thing is, for me, what's very interesting is the outrage, the global outcry. It's how could you do that, Israel? But we forget James Miller, a British filmmaker that was also killed by Israeli snipers. We forget Tom Hartland, he was like also a British activist who's killed in the head. We forget Shireen Abu Aqla, the American-Palestinian reporter. It's like every time it's like, oh, Hamas did it. Oh, we did. We're so sorry. Let's continue. There's no accountability. And I know, let's continue. There's no accountability. And I know, and I say it everywhere I go, if Israel today ended the war, they will be actually praised. It's like, thank you so much for not killing more Palestinians. Maybe they even give a Nobel Peace Prize to Netanyahu. This will happen, this will actually happen. Israel will be praised. There will be absolutely no accountability of what they did in Gaza for the past 6 months. This is what pains me. It's not like at the ending of the war. It's like after the war. It's like nothing they have done.
How do I react to you? How do I react to what you're saying and
I want you to react to me as if we are both citizens of the world. Mm-hmm. Because,
I did. That's why I said what you're doing and and your piece.
And I want you for 1 second, have an exercise, step out of your anchorage chair and look at the Western media as a viewer and see from the eye of a viewer the horrendous work that the Western media has done.
Tell me.
Because for months, the Western media went with the Israeli story, decapitated babies, gang rape, all of this. And then we know about the Hannibal Directive. We know how the Israeli troops killed a lot of their own citizens. Not I'm saying that Hamas didn't do anything, of course. All of the decapitated baby stories were debunked. The story that Anthony Blinken went in and talked about the Hamas fighters who killed and raped and cut limbs and then had breakfast. All of that was debunked. And then the Western media, not a single time, they said, we're sorry, we messed up. We led the whole world to believe these lies in order to justify the daily killing of Palestinians. And not a single person came out and retracted their lies. And not even said, we should even look at what we said and we apologize for it. This is the problem. And they're talking about sexual violence against what happened, but nobody's talking about sexual violence on Palestinian women every single day. Nobody is talking, I remember 2016, where the whole media was up in arms about Russia interference in elections. Nobody's talking about how AIPAC is basically bragging about paying all of these politicians to win their elections. Nobody is talking about that. And I wonder, as someone who left the Middle East and came to the West with the promise of free expression, and to say whatever I want, and I come here and I say all of these red lines about not talking about Israel, because if we talk about Israel, if we talk about it, we're going to be suddenly called anti-Semitic.
Do you not think the tone is changing, given the mounting death toll?
Slightly, but it is performative rage. The ward reader are so enraged about Israel killing the 70 workers. And we talk about that, but I find that there's more rage about killing 7 foreign workers more than the rage about killing 30,000 Palestinians.
I mean, look.
Remember when we were
say that?
Remember when 30,000 was too much? Remember when 3,000 Palestinians was too much? You know what happened? 3,000. Tomorrow, if 300,000 Palestinians killed, nobody will care. Nobody will care. Numbers don't mean anything.
Why do you think that is?
Because they don't look at Palestinians as equal human beings.
It is really hard to hear you say and hear others say that they don't look at us as people.
Because they were deemed animals, terrorists, Hamas sympathizers. Remember when we were out all the rage about babies killed in incubators, then baby killed of hungers, and then people killed in stampede, and then it's old news now. Remember when we were talking about did Hamas or did Israel bomb the Al Ahli hospital, and since then Israel bombed 36 hospitals? It's just they move too fast. And by the time you just catch up and you corner them, it's well, I'm entitled. If you talk about it, you're anti-Semitic. I'm doing this to protect myself. Here's the thing. Every time Israel say Israel have the right to defend itself. Israel has the right to exist. And I would say Israel have the right to go F itself.
Israel is turning hospitals into mass graves while the West fixates on anti-Semitism. A mass grave created by the IDF has been uncovered at a Gaza hospital where Palestinian civilians appear to have been the victims of a gruesome massacre. Ah, that's old news, you may be saying. We already knew about the massacre and mass graves which were discovered a few weeks ago at the Al-Shifa hospital in Gaza. No, that's a different mass grave from a different IDF massacre at a completely different Gaza hospital. The now completely destroyed Al-Shifa Hospital was in Gaza City. I'm talking about the Nasser Medical Complex in Khan Yunis, where some 210 bodies have reportedly been discovered in a mass grave after Israeli forces withdrew from the city earlier this month. 2 different massacres, 2 different hospitals, 2 different mass graves full of Palestinian civilians. The IDF are just attacking hospitals and mowing down civilians and trying to bury the evidence of their crimes. So naturally, we're seeing the Western political media class focus very hard on the problem of anti-Semitism allegations on college campuses. Biden denounces anti-Semitism on college campuses amid Columbia protests, reads a new headline from the Washington Post. As protests continue at Columbia, some Jewish students feel targeted, the New York Times urgently warns us. White House condemns blatantly anti-Semitic protests as agitators engulf Columbia University, blares Fox News. Columbia University faces full-blown crisis as rabbi calls for Jewish students to return home, says CNN. Columbia University, White House condemns anti-Semitism at college protests, the BBC reports. Getting far less attention than the fact that some Zionist university students are feeling uncomfortable feelings because other students say Palestinians are human beings is the fact that Israel is establishing a pattern of massacring civilians and burying them in mass graves outside hospitals in Gaza, or the fact that the IDF has been butchering children in Rafah, or the fact that the International Criminal Court is reportedly considering charging Benjamin Netanyahu and other Israeli officials for war crimes. Those matters are important, just not nearly as important as how some Western Jews feel emotionally upset about pro-Palestine protests. For that, the world must stop spinning on its axis until this extremely egregious problem has been addressed. All of the Western spin and distortion around Israel's mass atrocities in Gaza these last 6 months have revolved around centering feelings over human lives. How Western Jewish Zionists are feeling about pro-Palestine sentiment. How Joe Biden's feelings secretly feel about Netanyahu. How Israelis feel about October 7th. Wherever there's an opportunity to focus the narrative on what feelings are being felt by a politically convenient population, the Western press fall all over themselves to do so with tumescent enthusiasm. Wherever there's an opportunity to focus on Israeli atrocities, the Western press are nowhere to be found. If you belong to a group that isn't supported by the Western Empire, you can see your entire family murdered right in front of you, and the Western political media class still won't consider you a victim. If you belong to a group that the Empire regards as human, then even someone offending your feelings will be viewed as an unforgivable hate crime.
1989, I wrote this book. I write how I became a trend forecaster. And I became a political atheist when, and it's right here, the fall of the Shah. I was the chief government affairs specialist for the chemical industry. Number 2 guy running a major trade association. Back then, all I wanted to do was make money and have a good time. I was killing environmental legislation at the height of the environmental movement. And I'm living between DC and Chicago. And the Iranian conflict starts heating up. And Jimmy Carter, the little peanut farmer with a pair of cojones about the size of a peanut, he goes over there to visit the Shah on New Year's Eve with the Shah and his wife. I write about this in detail. He came back and he said that the Shah is the island of stability in the Middle East. In the Bronx, we used to say bullshit has its own sound. I'm seeing millions of people taking to the streets. The average person, like the little dopes you speak to in Parliament, these little boys and gutless girls, they had no idea of the United States, and as you were talking about, the UK overthrow of the democratically elected government of Mossadegh in 1953, because that lousy Iranian president had the nerve to say, no, this oil doesn't belong to Anglo-Iranian oil or Standard Oil. Oh, better known today as BP and, it's ExxonMobil back then, Standard Oil today. It belongs to the Iranian people. No, it doesn't. and all the data came out. It only took until 2017 for the crap that spewed out of that little Churchill's mouth. The MI6, him, and the CIA that was also headed by Kermit Roosevelt, Theodore Roosevelt's grandson, to overthrow Mossadegh. So when the people are taking to the streets, I said, no, this thing is for real. And that's how I became a trend forecaster. I became a political atheist, and I stopped believing the BS from the mainstream media, and I started investing in gold and oil. That's when I became a trend forecaster. I said, what will the implications be? And gold and oil, a $10,000 bet, I made almost $750,000. And I quit my job and I became a trend forecaster. I lost a lot of the dough. I was, gambling away. But now what's going on is the same thing. All they're doing is teaching us how to hate Iran. You're seeing all the sanctions, the crap, the puke coming out of the mouth of the politicians. We're condemning Iran for attacking Israel. Hey, wait a minute. Israel could attack Iran anytime they want. They could attack a consulate that's against international law, even in a time of war. They could kill any commander. They could kill anybody they want anywhere. That's right. We're the chosen people. Oh, it says so right in the Torah. Chapter 6, Section 8. You're making up this crap. Now they're putting sanctions on Iran. This thing is heating up. Israel is going to strike back. When they do, World War III is going to continue to escalate. If we don't have peace on Earth, we are going to be annihilated in nuclear war. Oh, don't believe me? Look up the Samson option. Oh yeah, in Israel, Samson option, if we lose, we go nuclear. And we only have about between 200 to 400 nuclear warheads. Oh, you don't have nuclear warheads? That's right. But Iran's not allowed to have them. We're the chosen people. This is serious.
It's deadly serious, Gerald. And sometimes I think there's only thee and me can see it. I've been following your coverage online, and I'm a big supporter of your journal. And I'm just wondering how it is that the United States, I'll come to the UK in a minute. How did the United States walk quietly into a situation where virtually every politician is literally bought and paid for by the supporters of Israel? And I'm talking people who wouldn't be a legend in their own street. I'm talking people whose faces I've never seen, whose names I've never heard. They're the congresswoman or man from this or that, and they're receiving hundreds of thousands of dollars from a foreign country, which doesn't even have to register as a foreign agent, such that your country is no longer in control of its own destiny. How does Joe Biden tell Netanyahu to go and get lost when Israel gave him $11.1 million? How?
He doesn't. Again, the whole thing is bought off, and you're making it perfectly clear that nobody knows about AIPAC, foreign establishment, and they're doing anything that they want. They're buying off everybody. America, this is the country that kills people all over the world in the name of freedom and democracy. To run for office in America, you got to have a lot of money behind you. By the way, I began my career running political campaigns in Westchester County, the richest county in America. I was the assistant to the Secretary of the New York State Senate, designed and instructed American politics and campaign technology, how to run campaigns, taught it at St. John's University. What people call a government is nothing more than a crime scene. And I also, by the way, I watched your podcast with your show with Scott Ritter on following Iran's attack. All of the media in America and all of the little imbeciles that follow the mainstream media believe that Israel was victorious in stopping Iran when they attacked, knowing nothing of the facts. Everybody should listen to that podcast that you did with Scott Ritter and how you introduced him and who he is, and he's a friend of mine. We go out to dinner. We talk at my peace rallies up here. I launched Occupy Peace over a decade ago. He gives the details, but here is the headlines that the people swallow. Iran has launched dozens of drones at Israel. IDF says it aims to intercept them in hours. And then they said 99% of them were destroyed. And again, have no details about the facts of this. So everybody, please watch that video. Scott Ritter makes it clear of the true danger Israel is in. And also, Mr. Galloway, you were talking about how they created, when I heard some of it before I came on the air, about how they invented the State of Israel. This is your Trends Journal when it used to be a quarterly, 2006. Crusades 2000. Regardless of what England's reasons or intentions were, self-serving or otherwise, Crusades 2000 was set in motion by the 1917 Balfour Declaration. Oh, it's a Balfour Declaration? Well, we don't know anything, but a Balfour Declaration that laid the foundation for Israel. Quote, His Majesty's government, these murderous bastards over there, where the sun never sets on the British Empire, we are slaughtering people all over the world. Oh, that's right, His Majesty's government. His Majesty's government views with favor the establishment in Palestine of a national home for the Jewish people. Who the hell is he to say that they should establish a national home for the Jewish people in Palestine? Oh, the Rothschilds. Look it up. It's a fact. Goes on. And we will use our best endeavors to facilitate the achievement of this objective. Totally invented. Totally invented. Have no right being there. Oh, and they just stole about another 7,000 acres of Palestinian land in the West Bank that they call settlements in violation of the Geneva Convention and Article 242 of the United Nations. This is serious what's going on. This is a demonic government in charge,
very
slaughtering
serious.
innocent.
Slaughtering 72% of the people who've been slaughtered were women and children. Ipso facto, by definition, not Hamas. The idea that these women and children were legitimate targets would not be accepted in any other theater of conflict. It would not be accepted as legitimate behavior by any other government anywhere in the world, including your government, including my government. But it is somehow acceptable for Israel to do it. And when they can no longer defend it, they simply begin not to report it. So 11 children were killed yesterday in a playground in the Benghazi refugee camp in Gaza. 11 children. Not one single British newspaper or British media outfit even reported that it happened. Talk about exceptionalism, Gerald.
Actually, at least, yep. And matter of fact, you know who did report it in the United States was the Cartoon News Network, CNN. And it said at least 13 people were killed, including several children, and more than 25 injured after a strike targeted the Al-Maghazi refugee camp. And they show the graphics, the videos, and this is the nice language. You ready? Dozens of people appear to be running around in panic. They had a video, screaming and trying to count and carry the dead bodies. It shows several casualties scattered on the floor, including children with blood streaming across the floor. Kids screaming, people screaming, kids dead on the ground. They were just playing football, and they were martyred. This guy's, again, right in front of everybody's eyes. Like you said, could you imagine if it was the Jewish people in Gaza and the Palestinians were bombing them to death like this? Oh my God, how terrible. The hypocrisy.
It is,
hypocrisy.
it's very
Going back
difficult
to
to
Iran.
bear. It's very difficult to remain unemotional about it. But let me try and segue before I start crying. You are a political atheist, and your attitude is, a plague on both, on all of their houses, and that's no wonder when we see the character of the people that are running for office. But because you are the most perspicacious man in America, help our international audience with your reading so far on how the American presidential election is going.
It's a guessing game. We had the Trends Journal magazine, and by the way, anybody could get the Trends Journal magazine by going to trendsjournal.com, and you get 10% off. It notes they'll put up the link to put on, and it's only $2.50 a week. It's nothing. And this week's is almost 200 pages, and you can listen to it. It's a magazine. You read what you want. But going back to the presidential election, we called Trump a winner in May of 2016 when we said that we were the only ones saying it. All the polls showed he would lose. Right now, it's a total guessing game. And again, I've been at this, I said, a lot of years. I used to run political campaigns towards St. John's University, on and on. One of my lines is, when all else fails, they take you to war. When you go to war, people have they back the president that's in power. If you need any more proof, let's go back to the .com bust. Again, we had forecasted in your Trends Journal, .com this, fall of 1999. We said that it was going to bust by the second quarter of 2000. It did in March. America's in a deep recession. They couldn't stand little Georgie Bush. What happens? 9/11. War on terror. We're going to get that guy Osama bin Laden dead or alive. A little boy of nothing, with a pair of cojones smaller than a mothball, a little ignorant little jerk of a nothing, a daddy's boy. 88% of the people swallow the crap spewing out of his mouth. When all else fails, they take you to war. Nobody could predict what's going to go on with this presidential reality show. That's all it is. And also, as people are watching, again, one of my lines is GC's 3 Gs, guns, gold, and a getaway plan. You better prepare for the worst. One of our top trends for 2024, it's right there for anybody to see, January 2nd, 2024, a golden year for gold. Gold prices are up now over $300 an ounce since we said that. The reason gold is going up, there are basic reasons. One, in the run-up to the presidential reality show, they're going to lower interest rates to keep the power in the United States. Ms. Facha Brut, the ugly face Janet Yellen, the Treasury Secretary, a former job was the head of the Federal Reserve, shows you who's running the country. She's the Treasury Secretary. They want to keep her in there. They're going to lower interest rates. The lower interest rates go, the deeper the dollar falls, and it's going to be the beginning of the death of the dollar, the higher gold prices go. Number 2, oil prices, which are going to bring inflation in very heavily if and when, not if, when the Israel war and Iran war escalate. You're going to see oil prices hit around $130 a barrel. That's going to crash the global economy and the equity markets. Number 3 is they're going to do everything they can to come out with a digital currency.
Quashing university protests and banning TikTok to make the kids love Israel. Notes from the edge of the narrative matrix. It's just a tough situation with victims on both sides. On one side, you've got people being slaughtered in droves by genocidal massacres and siege warfare, while on the other, you've got people whose feelings get hurt when those atrocities are opposed. Hard to say which is worse. I have dedicated every day of my life to the project of spreading awareness of the depravity and deceitfulness of the Western Empire, but I will never write anything more effective toward this end than what the Empire is doing itself on university campuses right now. I mean, you have to kind of wonder what they're thinking. Yeah, that's it. Violently quash pro-Palestine protests at universities, ban TikTok to ensure the suppression of pro-Palestine content, and saturate the boomer media with obvious propaganda. That'll make the kids love Israel. Meanwhile, the US empire is still playing games with each and every one of our lives by continually taking insane risks in its world-threatening brinkmanship with a nuclear superpower. It turns out last month the Biden administration secretly sent Ukraine long-range Army tactical missile systems, ATACMS, which Ukraine has reportedly already used to attack a Russian base in Crimea. In 2022, when Ukraine first started urging the United States to send it the ATACMS, which has nearly 4 times the range of the HIMARS weapons the US has been supplying, Russia's foreign ministry spokeswoman Maria Zakharova immediately responded with a warning that their use on Russian territory would make the US a direct participant in the conflict, and Russia would respond accordingly. Crimea is considered Russian territory by the Russian Federation. In an article published in Anti-War last year titled ATACMS, Be Very Afraid of This Acronym, West Suburban Peace Coalition President Walt Zlatow wrote that this missile system has potential to draw the US and NATO into all-out war with Russia. Here's a quote. ATACMS are long-range US missiles that can strike up to 190 miles. Top US officials, likely including President Biden, are seriously considering giving ATACMS to Ukraine in their battle to take back all Russian gains in Ukraine, including Crimea. They can reach both Crimea and the Russian mainland. If so used by Ukraine to attack Russia, it may be a missile too far that could ignite Russian tactical nuclear weapons in Ukraine. Further escalation into nuclear confrontation between Russia and the US and NATO alliance seeking Russia's defeat becomes more likely. End quote. Biden proclaimed it a good day for world peace when he signed the World War III bill, which will pour weapons of death and destruction into Israel, Ukraine, and Taiwan. This is the inverted reality the U.S. centralized empire premises its narratives about itself upon. They've got the mainstream public espousing a completely backwards and upside-down worldview, which is why we live in a completely backwards and upside-down civilization. The Ukraine war funding part of the bill was actually reportedly pushed through with behind-the-scenes collaboration between Trump and Republican lawmakers. Anyone who still buys Trump's ending the war is fighting the deep state shtick is a fucking moron. When Israel's genocide funding made it through the House, Benjamin Netanyahu tweeted, "The U.S. Congress just overwhelmingly passed a much-appreciated aid bill that demonstrates strong bipartisan support for Israel and defends Western civilization. Thank you, friends. Thank you, America." And he's not wrong. The U.S. Congress does have massive bipartisan support for Israel, and pouring war machinery into that genocidal apartheid state does in fact bolster the blood-fueled machine of nonstop murder and tyranny that is Western civilization. Human thriving arises from curiosity. Curiosity about the way our material universe operates leads to advances in science and all the benefits that come with it. Curiosity about how our civilization's power structures operate leads to an understanding of how the world really works, which will lead to the emergence of a truth-based society if realized on a collective level. Curiosity about our own consciousness and inner processes leads to self-realization and the harmonious way of moving in the world which flows from it. If a healthy humanity exists in the future, it will above all be a deeply curious species.
More than 300 bodies found in a mass grave at Nasir Hospital in Gaza, including children executed with their hands tied behind their backs. Children executed with hands tied. White America, I need you to hear this again, because white people love them some Israel. You guys think that Muslims are terrorists. You guys think black people are violent. This is your allies. White America, listen to me. Your allies kill children with their hands tied behind their back. Behind their back. And you guys think Hamas is terrorist. You guys realize if I accept the worst premise, the establishment premise of Hamas, Israel is still worse. You guys realize even in the stated propaganda about Hamas don't execute entire family members. They don't wipe out entire families at once. They kill the IDF. There may be victims during assaults and a lot of people won't say this. I'll be one of the few people that say this. Hamas contends that there was no goal to kill civilians on October 7th. They would just take hostages. No one would say this. People say Hamas want to kill civilians. They never say that. Hamas say they don't have intention to target civilians. But they say IDF, and any people who assist the IDF, they don't feel as civilians. But you guys realize that even with their interpretation, Hamas don't execute entire family members. So what has been confirmed is that Israel, when they target members of Hamas, militants, they decide that the best time to kill them is when they are at home with their children. You guys understand that? They say that's the best time to kill them. And most of the time, a lot of the times, these strikes wipe out the entire family as designed. Because they don't want to create, they want to kill the next generation of resistance fighters as well. So by Israeli policy, it's okay for them to execute entire families if they are even remotely associated with anyone in Hamas. You guys realize that the worst interpretation of what Hamas is not that Hamas don't go after family members. There is no reality in which Israel has the moral high ground over Hamas. Not a single motherfucking one. You understand? And there's a reason why you won't see me on Piers Morgan. There's a reason why the Hill won't take a fucking chance on me anymore. Because I'm not gonna fucking wedge and create an opening of weakness. These people create an opening of weakness. Yeah, I condemn Hamas. Okay, what the fuck? You just gave away your entire goddamn premise. This is why I don't consider you good on this issue if you condemn Palestinian resistance, because I would dismantle these people if I was on Piers Morgan and he talking about, do you condemn Hamas? I commend them because they're going after the most fascist, violent criminals known in modern human history. Doing shit, the likes we haven't seen since Auschwitz, my friends. And I know I'm unhinged right now, but why isn't every live stream like this? Why isn't everyone fucking live on YouTube doing this? Do you hear what I fucking said? Children executed with hands tied behind their back. Meanwhile, you got people on YouTube. I'm gonna report on the news today. So you got people using gender. Isn't gender weird? Oh my God, the trans issue. Isn't the trans issue strange? Oh my God, women in sports. Trans women in sports. Shut the fuck up. Shut the fuck up. All of you guys doing this shit when you got our government sponsoring murdering of children. You talking about, oh, there's migrants in my city. Fuck your city. There's migrants in my city. Migrants are taking some money as we send millions to Israel. Fuck you. Like, what the? You understand we live in the most evil empire in modern times? I'm gonna read this again if you guys understand why I'm mad, because I trigger myself. More than 300 bodies found in a mass grave at Nasir Hospital. Sorry, I misspoke earlier. I said Al-Shifa. So I wanted to correct myself. I obviously misspoke. So I keep saying Al-Shifa, but you guys understand that Israel completely dismantled the medical system in Gaza, in Palestine? The entire medical hospital system completely destroyed. Something that was considered off limits. We're seeing white people, we're seeing the West rebel against international law. Our hospitals forever was considered off limits. Using starvation as a tool of war was forever off limits. Collective punishment was forever off limits. Now you got Piers Morgan, you have all these white people doing shows justifying it. rebelling against international law. And who's standing up against them? South Africa, Nicaragua, the global South, the same country that white people think are shitholes. They're the only countries that are standing up for international law as white people want to tear it up. Who's standing for international law? Africa. Who's standing for international law? China. Who's standing for international law? Russia. And I'm going to be the only channel who don't give a fuck about losing subscribers. Yemen, thank you, Didi. Ansar Allah, all the people you guys told me my entire life was fucking terrorists, they're the one who wants peace. I'm the only motherfucker who don't care about losing subscribers because I'm not here to protect your feelings. I'm going to tell you guys exactly what the hell's going on. This Western chauvinism you live with this your entire life, your worship of capitalism, the reason why you don't want to call yourself a communist is because you're like, oh yeah, we do fucked up shit, but isn't our society great? No, it's not. You live in a society full of genocidal mass psychosis. You guys stole untold trillions of dollars from the global South. Hundreds of millions of dollars being stolen from the Africa and the global South, and you guys still have poor white people. How is that possible? You guys stole the wealth from black and brown countries. You guys stole the wealth from Africa, from South America. You guys stole all our goddamn wealth, and you guys still have poor white people. And then those same poor white people are fucking patriotic. The most counter-revolutionary motherfuckers, bootlicking celebrities, bootlicking Elon Musk, poor as hell, didn't benefit from colonialism at all. This is the image I always use. We doing it live. This one, damn, I need to make it big screen. Open image and new tab. Oh damn, it's too small. Damn, this shit hella small. Let me see if I can find a bigger version of this picture. I share this all the time. I'm gonna beat you motherfuckers to class struggle in revolutionary politics, or I'm gonna force you guys to unsubscribe. I don't know if you guys can see it. I'm fucking mad I can't find a larger version of this picture. But you know, this is why like I find MAGA and I find these people with disdain. Like, poor white people advocate against free healthcare, advocate against socialism, and you guys stole all the wealth of of the rest of the world, and you still poor. You're still poor, but you're patriotic to this country. That's some true cut shit if I ever seen it. Where do I even fucking start, bro? I went on a 30-minute fucking rant, bro. I'm supposed to be doing a segment. Let me collect myself. Dude, you know what happened? I pulled up that receipt of the massacre. Like, I've been avoiding a lot of this stuff. Cause you guys know I'm already as radical as it comes. I don't need to see dead children. I've been avoiding that shit. But I know what's going on, man. I've been reading about what's going on. We're seeing Auschwitz level shit. Oh wait, thank you, Didi. Didi sent me the bigger version. Oh, look at Didi with the fucking banger. I'm retweeting. I don't care if this is old. Our friend Didi with the fucking banger, bro. I tell you, our community is just, killing the damn game. By the way, if you guys will know where I got a lot of my information from the DPRK, this is the account right here. Banger after banger. Here's the image I put up earlier. Now do you guys know why I'm merciless on white fragility and white feelings? How can you possibly be an anti-communist? How can you possibly be a capitalist and you're a poor white person? You guys realize that there's nothing more pathetic than that to me? You guys fucking ruined the economic potential of billions of people. And then you are still poor and white. And then those poor white people are like, oh, fucking socialist. Oh, man. You guys know there's multiple strategies of getting people on your side. And some people you can't fucking get on your side with logic. We tried. Some people you got on your side by shaming them, bro. Like, if you want to poor white people, like, man, I like Nick, but I think he's taking too far with anti-capitalism. You're not even a capitalist. You're an exploited worker. Repeat after me, my friends. You're not a capitalist. You're an exploited worker cosplaying as a capitalist. People like, I want my private property. Bitch, do you own an oil rig? Do you own a hospital? There's fucking nothing you want. There's nothing you have that we want, you child. You got these people, oh my God, you're anti-capitalist. This is the result of your system that left you poor, that you are still defending. Sir, if we dismantle it through fucking endless amount of theory, lectures, the anti-capitalist intellectual argument is out there. If you're still resisting it, I got nothing else but to shame you for thinking that you're a fucking capitalist as you work at Walmart. You're a teacher, you think you're a capitalist. What the fuck is wrong with you people?
Remember, all this fascism would feel way more fascism-y under Trump. Okay, yes, police are currently in the process of violently stomping out political dissent on university campuses across America following multiple statements from President Biden attacking the protesters as anti-Semitic for opposing the genocide he's been enthusiastically facilitating in Gaza. And okay, fine. Bands of right-wing thugs are currently going around terrorizing students who don't align with the US government's support for the State of Israel. But before any of my fellow liberals get any wild ideas about ceasing their support for Biden during an election year just because of a little tyranny and genocide, I think it's important to remind everyone that all this fascism would feel way more fascist-y if Trump was president. Think about it. If Trump was presiding over jackbooted authoritarian suppression while mobs of marauding fascists attack dissident youths with impunity, wouldn't that just feel way worse? Wouldn't it feel way more scary and upsetting in your feely bits? When cops are cracking skulls at Columbia University to punish young people for protesting their government's actions, wouldn't the cracking sound way worse if the president was being all crude and impolite about it? After all, if Trump was allowing these things to happen in the United States, it would be because he is the second coming of Adolf Hitler. But when Biden does it, it's because he's walking a fine line of nuance and diplomacy and something political pragmatism. Whatever, my point is, we don't have to think about it too hard or feel too bad about it. And if there's one thing we've learned over the last 7 months, it's that the only thing that matters is you and your feelings, and the way your feelings are feeling inside. Are campus protests making you feel unsafe and threatened? Then that's all that matters. We needn't get into the details of whether those feelings are based on any factual circumstances. Does someone saying from the river to the sea make your feelings more uncomfortable than US war machinery being used to massacre children? Then we'll focus on that to the exclusion of all else. If Trump was letting these horrible things happen, we'd feel outraged and upset. We might even feel obliged to get up and go protest the things he is doing, which as we all know can often cause us to miss brunch. But because a trusted Democrat is in office, we can just relax and think pleasant thoughts and drink bottles of wine and NyQuil in the bathtub. You don't have to like what's happening to your country. You don't even have to pay attention to it. All you have to do is make sure you keep telling everyone to shut up and stop criticizing the president, and to tick that little box next to Biden's name in November. Because it's just a tough fact that in order to defeat Orange Mussolini, we're going to have to get comfortable with fascism.
In July of 1994, Richard Serrano, reporting for the LA Times, wrote a rare piece on life inside the United States Disciplinary Barracks, the lone maximum security military prison in the United States. On the far-flung Kansas prairie, in the basement of the prison, Serrano writes, lies the lone death row of the United States military. Their lives are spent in cells no bigger than 8 feet by 6 feet by 10 feet, with a bunk, a toilet and a sink, a desk, and a locker. They are allowed books and magazines, television and radio. Down the hall lies a lethal injection chamber designed to dispatch these men with the push of a needle. The inmates, at this time 6 in all, showed a pattern that was impossible to ignore. 5 of the 6 condemned men at Leavenworth are minorities. Serrano writes that this pattern was unchanged from the prison's earliest days. Between the passage of the Uniform Code of Military Justice in 1950 and the suspension of military executions in 1961, 8 of the 9 soldiers put to death were black. 1 was white. 30 years have passed since that article was published, and this glaring pattern still to this day remains unchanged. Today, Fort Leavenworth's death row holds 4 inmates. We'll start with Nidal Hassan. Hi, my name is GDF. I rely completely on my patrons, subscribers, and donations. An Army psychiatrist facing deployment to one of America's war zones killed 13 people and wounded 30 others on Thursday in a shooting rampage with 2 handguns at the sprawling Fort Hood Army post in central Texas. The gunman, who was still alive after being shot 4 times, was identified by law enforcement authorities as Major Nidal Malik Hassan, aged 39. As the Christian Science Monitor described Hassan, a psychiatrist trained to help soldiers cope with the stress of warfare instead turned on them. David Zucchino of the Los Angeles Times described testimony from his military hearing nearly 3 years later, from the responding police officers. On the chaotic afternoon of November 5th, a gunman firing a laser-equipped pistol shot and killed several soldiers inside a crowded base processing center, then ran outside to shoot more victims. Testimony suggested that the shooter passed up several opportunities to shoot civilians while firing point-blank at uniformed soldiers. And the next year, August of 2013, dressed in army fatigues, Hassan, who turns 43 next month, listened impassively as the death sentence was handed down by a panel of 13 senior military officers in a unanimous decision after less than 2 hours of deliberations. It may be interesting to follow Hassan's case with another one that happened a few years later, which, interestingly enough, resulted in a starkly different outcome for the accused. In this instance, rather than targeting uniformed military officers, Sergeant Robert Bales hunted down the most vulnerable. Authorities say Bales left a remote outpost in Kandahar Province's Panjwai district early March 11th and went house to house, gunning down villagers. Sergeant Bales has been accused of cold-bloodedly shooting to death 16 Afghan civilians on March 11th, 9 of them children. Bales has never denied leaving Camp Alambi in Kandahar Province and walking by himself to 2 neighboring villages where he fired on locals with a 9mm and an M4 rifle. Said prosecutor Lieutenant Colonel Jay Morse, he decides to take out his aggression on the weak and the defenseless. Nonetheless, his outcome was not spending his days on death row for killing unarmed and defenseless Afghan civilians and children, but life without parole. The next death row inmate we'll look at is Hassan Akbar. Prosecutors said Sergeant Akbar, a Muslim, attacked his camp days before the soldiers were to move into Iraq because he was concerned about American troops killing fellow Muslims in the Iraq War. Richard Serrano of the LA Times described his crimes in vivid detail. Akbar turned on his fellow soldiers on March 23, 2003, tossing grenades into officers' tents and shooting at them as they ran from the burning compound in Kuwait. The 2 officers he killed were Army Captain Christopher Seffert, 27, who was shot in the back, and Air Force Major Gregory Stone, 40, hit with 83 pieces of grenade shrapnel. The wounded soldiers' injuries included collapsed lungs and shattered limbs. Testimony showed that Akbar felt insulted by soldiers who disparaged Muslims as the U.S. prepared for war in the Middle East. When he was arrested shortly after the attack, Akbar said he feared American forces were going to rape and kill Muslim women in Iraq. As we shall see, his concerns weren't unfounded. I'd like to contrast this death sentence with the sentence of another soldier who attacked his fellow troops overseas, killing even more soldiers than Akbar. The U.S. soldier who authorities say killed 5 fellow troops, including a Navy commander, at a stress clinic in Iraq on Monday, apparently used a weapon he wrested away from another soldier, a defense official said. When Russell was leaving the clinic Monday, he became hostile and an altercation broke out. He was then escorted back to his quarters by another soldier. A couple of hours later, Russell seized a weapon from a fellow soldier, commandeered a vehicle, and drove back to the clinic. Though Sergeant John M. Russell was sentenced to life. Interesting, considering the military judge, David L. Cohn, found that Russell, now 48, acted with premeditation in the 2009 shootings of all 5 victims. Serial killer Ronald A. Gray is another inmate at Fort Leavenworth's death row. In 1988, he was sentenced to death. His execution was further approved by President George W. Bush in 2008. President Bush on Monday approved the execution of an Army soldier who terrorized Fayetteville, North Carolina for months in the late 1980s, and was eventually convicted of raping and killing 4 women and attempting to kill another. Eventually, he was convicted in connection with 8 and 4 murders that took place in the area. Though it appears that serial killers get vastly different sentences depending on who they are, where they've committed their crimes, along with who they target. Staff Sergeant Calvin Gibbs, for example, led the so-called Kill Team, a group of individuals from the 3rd Platoon, Bravo Company, 2nd Battalion, 1st Infantry Regiment, and 5th Brigade, 2nd Infantry Division. On January 15, 2010, they killed a 15-year-old child. Did you see him present any weapons? Was he aggressive toward you at all? Asked a military investigator. No, not at all. Nothing. He wasn't a threat, confessed Corporal Jeremy Morlock. Morlock threw a grenade at the child, whose name was Gulmuddin. As the grenade exploded, he and Private First Class Andrew Holmes opened fire, shooting the boy repeatedly at close range with an M4 carbine and a machine gun. Captain Patrick Mitchell thought there was something strange about Morlock's story. Quote, "I just thought it was weird that someone would come up and throw a grenade at us," Mitchell later told investigators. Despite this, he ordered Staff Sergeant Chris Sprague to, quote, "make sure the boy was dead." Sprague raised his rifle and fired twice. Then Staff Sergeant Calvin Gibbs, the platoon squad leader, as recalled by one soldier, started messing around with the kid, moving his arms and mouth and acting like the kid was talking. Then, using a pair of razor-sharp medic shears, he reportedly sliced off the dead boy's pinky finger and gave it to Holmes as a trophy for killing his first Afghan. After which, Holmes took to carrying the finger with him in a Ziploc bag. He wanted to keep the finger forever and wanted to dry it out. On January 27th, they spotted a man on the side of the road. According to official statements made by several soldiers, he also appears to have been deaf or mentally disabled. The man began walking toward the troops. "Fire," someone yelled. Gibbs opened fire, followed by at least 5 other soldiers. In the course of a few seconds, they expended approximately 40 rounds. The man's body lay on the ground. He turned out to be completely unarmed. Above his beard, a large portion of his skull was missing, blown away by the hail of bullets. Specialist Michael Wagner collected a piece of the skull and kept it as a trophy. Then, the incident was staged to look like he may have had a weapon, Private Justin Stoner told investigators. Basically, what we did was a desperate search to justify killing this guy, but in reality, he was just some old deaf guy. We basically executed this man. On February 22nd, Staff Sergeant Calvin Gibbs entered the home of Marach Aga and ordered him outside. First, Gibbs fired an AK-47 into a nearby wall and dropped the weapon at Aga's feet. Then he shot the man at close range with his M4 rifle. Morlock and Wagner followed up with a few rounds of their own. With the scene staged to his satisfaction, Gibbs called in a report. On May 2nd at Kaladai, in a compound filled with children, they picked out a man with a white beard and escorted him outside. He seemed friendly, Specialist Adam Winfield recalled. He didn't seem to have any sort of animosity toward us. Gibbs turned to his men. You guys want to wax this guy or what? He asked. Morlock and Winfield agreed that the man seemed perfect. Gibbs walked the Afghan to a nearby ditch and forced him to his knees, ordering him to stay that way. Gibbs took cover behind a low wall and chucked a grenade toward the Afghan. As the grenade went off, Morlock and Winfield opened fire. Morlock got off several rounds with his M4. Winfield, who was armed with the more powerful SAW machine gun, squeezed off a burst that lasted 3 to 5 seconds. Morlock ran up and dropped the Russian pineapple grenade near the dead man's hand. Gibbs walked up to the body, stood directly over it, and fired twice into the man's head, shattering his jaw. Soldiers had pushed away the dead man's wife and children, who were screaming, hysterical with grief. Gibbs took out a pair of medical shears and cut off the corpse's left pinky finger, which he kept for himself. Then, wearing a surgical glove, he reached into the dead man's mouth, pulled out a tooth, and handed it to Winfield. The dead man, it turned out, was a peaceful cleric named Mullah al-Adad. Short of a life sentence, Jeremy Morlock received 24 years, with possibility of parole in 7. Specialist Adam Winfield, one of Mullah al-Adad's murderers, received 3 years. Private First Class Andrew Holmes, murderer of 15-year-old Gul Muddin, received 7 years. Staff Sergeant Calvin Gibbs, the squad leader and collector of fingers and teeth, was given a life sentence, but he will be eligible for parole in less than 9 years. Timothy Hennis is the last remaining death row inmate to be covered here. His death sentence is the result of a heinous slaughter. In May of 1985, Army Staff Sergeant Hennis responded to a classified ad from a local Fayetteville, North Carolina woman selling her English setter. He left with a new dog and the knowledge that the woman's Air Force captain husband was away from home. Hennis returned later to murder 31-year-old Catherine Eastburn and her 2 daughters. They found 5-year-old Kara stabbed repeatedly in the chest. Aaron, a 3-year-old, lay on one side of the bed, bludgeoned in the chest and back. On the other side lay Katie, naked from the waist down. She had been stabbed 15 times. All 3 Eastburn's throats had been slit. You now know that this awful story will be followed by another, which should illuminate for you all the glaring inconsistencies in sentencing for U.S. troops who commit shocking and disgusting crimes. Though this next crime shows similarities, the outcomes are, again, vastly different. It involves the case of 14-year-old Abir Qasim Hamza al-Janabi and the grisly March 12th slayings in which Abir's skull was smashed and her legs and torso set on fire. As a side note, the case also raised questions as to the conduct of American military personnel in Iraq as a whole. Given that the area was known to be a terrorist stronghold, many former and active duty officers are wondering how such a small convoy of soldiers, a single vehicle's worth, was left on its own, apparently far from the watchful gaze of a superior officer. Where were the older sergeants and the lieutenants and captain who should have prevented this crime from happening? Asks Barry McCaffrey, a retired 4-star general. The apparent lack of supervision makes it harder for military officials to cast this as a one-time, isolated incident. Private First Class Stephen Dale Green led 4 other men to a hideous massacre. He and 4 other soldiers went to the house of an Iraqi family in Yusufia, a town near Mahmudiyah, about 20 miles south of Baghdad. Green, then 21 years old, and James Barker, Paul Cortez, Jesse Spielman, and Brian Howard arrived there with the intention to the teenage girl who lived there with her family. After the Green allegedly shot and killed Abir, as well as her parents and 6-year-old sister. The soldiers then set the house on fire in an attempt to cover up the crime and threw a gun into a canal. Despite the savage nature of the killings, the accused were given light sentences. Writes James Dow for the New York Times, a jury in Kentucky sentenced a 24-year-old former soldier to life in prison without parole on Thursday for raping a 14-year-old Iraqi girl and murdering her parents, and a younger sister in Iraq. The verdict spared the defendant Stephen D. Green death. At least 4 other soldiers have pleaded guilty or were convicted in military courts for their roles in the rape and murders. While most received long prison terms, none are facing the death penalty, and all will be eligible for parole in 10 years or less.
The bizarre gymnastics of the Gaza aid pier. Notes from the edge of the narrative matrix. So let me get this straight. The U.S. wound up building its floating pier a few miles off the coast of Gaza to deliver humanitarian aid, but nobody will be able to ship the aid directly to the pier to get it to Gaza. Instead, the aid will be delivered to Cyprus via air or sea, and then from Cyprus the aid will be shipped 200 miles to the pier. From there, the pallets of aid will be loaded onto smaller U.S. Army boats, which will then carry the aid from the pier to a long causeway on Gaza's actual coast. Those pallets will then be carried from the boats to the shore via the causeway, possibly by British troops or possibly by Israeli troops, depending on what source you're reading, and taken into Gaza by IDF troops after careful examination and approval of their contents. All to deliver some 90 to 150 truckloads worth of aid per day, which is far short of the 500 truckloads the UN says Gaza needs. And this is all being done because Israel isn't simply letting people drive an adequate amount of aid through the custom-built gates directly into Gaza. Since Washington doesn't want to exert any pressure on Israel to allow such a self-evident move, this immensely complicated and expensive dance is being performed to deliver a pathetically inadequate amount of aid instead. Aid that is only necessary because Israel has been destroying Gaza in its genocidal bombing campaign, which it has been carrying out with total impunity. Cool. Very normal and cool. So glad Trump lost in 2020, otherwise we'd be seeing fascistic crackdowns on political dissent, police brutalizing protesters, tyrannical suppression of free speech, and the facilitation of racist and Islamophobic agendas. That psycho would probably be committing genocide by now. In a speech on Thursday, Biden defended the violent nationwide police crackdowns on university protests against his genocide in Gaza, saying, "Dissent must never lead to disorder." Ah, yes, Joe, that's very progressive of you. Dissent, obviously, should always be completely innocuous and obedient and not disruptive in any way. As Martin Luther King Jr. said, "Our foremost value is to obey the law at all times and inconvenience nobody, because dissent must never lead to disorder." That's why our civil rights movement famously never has any run-ins with law enforcement. He said this in one of his most influential works, Letter from Birmingham Candy Shop. The Wall Street Journal has an article out titled, "In Gaza, Authorities Lose Count of the Dead," which confirms what's been obvious for months. The Gaza Health Ministry doesn't have the infrastructure to keep track of how many people Israel is killing. This means the official death toll from the Israeli onslaught is almost certainly a massive undercount. You guys, I'm super sincerely concerned about hate speech on university campuses, said the person who's made an entire career out of pushing for the mass murder of brown-skinned foreigners at every opportunity. The U.S. war machine views Palestinians as an inconvenient obstacle to its military agendas in the Middle East, in the same way it views the local flora and fauna as an inconvenient obstacle when it's constructing a new military base, or how it sees whales as an inconvenient obstacle because of public concern about Navy sonar testing damaging their hearing and killing them. Palestinians are just viewed as an annoying indigenous animal that gets in the way of the imperial war machinery, and they'd be more than happy for that nuisance to be eliminated completely. I have had multiple Biden supporters seriously tell me that January 6th was worse than backing a genocide in Gaza in order to argue that Trump was worse than Biden. The mainstream liberal worldview will twist you up so bad inside that you can't even see Palestinians as human beings. Everything Americans were warned would happen under Trump has happened under Biden. The only retort Democrats have to this is, "Oh yeah, well, this all would have been way worse under Trump," a claim which A, is based on literally nothing, and B, is completely unfalsifiable. As I've said before, The lesson here is not that Trump is better than Biden or that you should support Republicans. The lesson is that no matter who you vote for, you get surging authoritarianism at home and war, military expansionism, and brinkmanship abroad. And that this system has got to go. To look at what's happening and make it about who you should vote for is to completely miss the lesson of what's happening. That it doesn't matter who you vote for, because the system is rigged to only let you vote for murderous tyrannical imperialists who serve the interests of plutocrats and empire managers instead of normal human beings. That bickering about where your votes should go is exactly what those plutocrats and empire managers want you to do, because it keeps you trapped within the framework of status quo politics and prevents you from looking at measures that could actually bring about real change, like direct action, general strikes, the fomenting of revolutionary ideas, and the emergence of a powerful revolutionary faction.
Hello, my friend. How are you? Hope you have a nice day.
Well, we're doing fantastic. It's really great to have you. Thanks for staying up late for us here. I guess I wanted to start here. You gave an interview back in November of 2023 and said that you and the other folks in the El Mayadeen crew were not going to leave South Lebanon. Talk about why it was so important for you to stay and report, and some of what you think people in the United States should know about what people in South Lebanon are living with right now.
Thank you, first of all, for having me, and sorry for my accent. I don't know how to talk English very well. I'm talking English in the Balbakian way, not the Lebanese way. Anyway, the most important thing that I did by staying in the front, that I am with you now, and I'm talking to Western people to tell them the truth that not anybody say this truth. You are always our friend. We first of all, we don't hate the United States, the people of the United States. We hate the United States government like you hate it. I was hearing you about the homeless things in the United States and how they treat the Americans, and we are treated in the same way, but the difference is that they don't put us in jails, they kill us. And this is why it was very important to stay in the front line and to say what is happening on the ground and to talk in English to make clear to all the Western people and not the government that this is not the truth that they are telling you. The media is telling you a false information, and the truth is that what we're presenting. So this was important. We are faced by threat, or we are threatened by death every day, every hour, every single second. Now maybe, and I'm talking to you, maybe a drone will hit me now, but we are not going to surrender because we want all the world to see how much criminal is Israel. This is weird for you maybe, but I'm happy when I see that those people they put out their real faces. For 10 years or 20 years, they say we are a good country, we are a progressive country, we live in the Middle East, and the Middle East is a jungle, and we are the civilization. Now you see the genocide in Gaza, 100,000 between injured and killed. 40,000 killed in all Gaza, 7 months of killing people. In Lebanon we have more than 400 kills, and this state is now in front of all the people, especially the American people, especially the Western people that know humanity. The people, they know humanity, and they know that this is wrong. You can't now say that Israel is an angel. Anybody, even that the guys who defend Israel, they are saying that we are killers. They say we are killers. We want to kill. So this is why it's very important for us and for other media to be there in the front line to say what is happening and to never surrender to the propaganda, to the Israeli propaganda and to the American propaganda in this war.
What motivated you to put out some of the videos you've put out, the Hello to My Enemies videos that I think have endeared you to millions around the world?
Well, I'm telling you, because I'm watching the Western media and I'm seeing a story that it's not right. They say it begins when they say the Israeli army said that we hit a military base for Hezbollah. I went there and I found cows and chickens are dead. It was a massacre in the cows and the chicken, and I was shocked. So I make the first video on hello my enemies. Do you know what is the target that especially when the Israeli hear and that the Israeli army is saying that hitting the bases of Hezbollah, they shout and they say, oh, we are winning, and this is not the truth. They did anything. They didn't do anything. They just destroy houses. They just destroy. They couldn't do anything military. After 7 months from now, we are hitting. We make more than 1,600 military operation. We always hit every day, daily. This situation didn't happen even when they invade us. Daily operation between 5 and 6 operation. So this situation made me to talk to the enemies. So this is why I wanted to talk and smile and talk with don't say hateful word. I'm talking very nicely and I'm talking the reality. This is where the idea came. Hello my enemies, may you have a very bad day. I hope that they have a very bad day. I hope that they die. It's not a problem for me, but I want to tell you calmly what is the truth. The truth that Israeli media, he never said that to them. And I was shocked by the video on the Israeli media, and they threat to kill me. Israeli people, I don't know if you know somebody who live in Israel or the Israeli army or the Israeli government. If they didn't find a glass of water, they will kill you. They love to kill. They love to. Every solution to everything is kill. They don't have to talk to you. They kill you. This is why I want to tell them it's not the solution. You are trying to kill us from 76 years now, and we are still here and we are still fighting. So try another solution. This is why I get involved into Hello My Enemies video. And I want to say a word from the heart. I didn't expect that this issue, this problem, us as Middle Easterns, as Lebanese, that we have this people. We have thousands of people that they are with us. They are seeing the truth, and this is not the case before the war. I didn't know that they are Americans that know the truth. This is why I'm saying thank you from all my heart to every Western people that are seeing the truth and that are speaking, and they are making out what is clear that we are seeing now. It's a genocide. I don't know how they will justify that the French people can do resistance against Hitler and against Zionists. I don't know. Against Nazis, and they forbidden us to resist Zionism. So Hitler killed thousands of people. You have the right to fight Hitler. But Netanyahu killed thousands of people. No, you must shut up and die. This is not how it works. And so this is why it's very important to you guys to talk. Always talk. Especially that Western people. We love you. We are seeing what are you doing. And I swear to God that the demonstrations in London are more effective from the demonstration in Lebanon. We fight, you demonstrate. Let us fight. Let us make them taste our fire. But you must always talk, and we will do the work. We will make you proud of us. And I will tell you everything we will do in this front line to know the reality and to know that we are very, very powerful, guys. We are very powerful. They couldn't beat us, but we need you. We need you beside us. Always talk, always share, always make us feel like humans because they are treating us like not animals. I swear, the animals has rights more than us Lebanese, Palestinians, and all who is fighting Israel.
Israel's defenders talk so much about feelings because they can't talk about facts. The Guardian has an article out titled "Israelis Voice Sadness and Defiance Over Gaza Protests on U.S. Campuses," subtitled, "People in Jerusalem express little sympathy with anti-war demonstrators, with some accusing them of hatred for Israel." It's exactly what it sounds like. An entire news report about the feelings that some Israelis are feeling in their feely bits about protests in another country on the other side of the world. The Guardian's Jason Burke asked some random people about their feelings outside a theater in Jerusalem, and then presented this weird nothing thing as a relevant news report. "We didn't know so many people hated Israel," some random security guard is quoted as saying. Such feelings appear widespread among the Jewish majority in Israel, 7 months after war was triggered by surprise attacks launched by Hamas into the south of the country, in which about 1,200 people, mostly civilians, were killed and 250 taken hostage, writes Burke. Jewish Israelis interviewed by The Guardian this week blame outrage overseas on misinformation, ignorance, historical hostility from international institutions such as the UN, global double standards, and entrenched anti-Semitism, Burke informs us. If you're just tuning in, it might seem odd to you that a major news outlet would publish a story about the emotions that some Israelis are feeling about foreign protests against an active genocide being committed by their country. After all, this is not a news story. Writing about how people's feelings are feeling is not news, and is not journalism. But that's exactly what the last 7 months have looked like in the imperial media. A non-stop fixation on feelings instead of facts. Israelis have upset feelings about anti-genocide protests. Western Jews have upset feelings at campus demonstrators. Biden has upset feelings at Netanyahu. Last October, the imperial media suddenly got a lot less interested in reporting on the facts on the ground with Israel and Gaza, and a whole lot more interested in reporting on how some groups of people feel about it instead. Western reporters, pundits, politicians, and officials cannot stop talking about this. The feelings of Israelis and Western Jews are not only given more importance than the feelings of Palestinians or any other group, they are given more importance than Palestinian lives. Some Zionist kid pretending to feel threatened on an Ivy League campus will get more coverage than the daily massacres that have been occurring in the densely packed city of Rafah. Israel is the only issue where the Western political media class treats people's feelings as a matter of supreme importance. If you're a stressed-out single parent struggling to pay bills and keep a roof over your kid's head, they don't care about your feelings. If you're an American who's been cast into destitution and homelessness by medical bills, they don't care about your feelings. If you're a Palestinian whose apartment complex was bombed with your entire family inside, they definitely don't care about your feelings. But if you're a Western Zionist who doesn't like the cognitive dissonance that comes with encountering anti-genocide protesters, or even if you're an Israeli who's upset about anti-genocide protests in a whole other country on the other side of the planet, they're very, very interested in your feelings. This is, of course, because the West's unconditional support for Israel cannot be defended through facts. So the narrative control needs to focus instead on one non-stop appeal to emotion fallacy. Their position is so gross and indefensible that all they have left is babbling about some select people having upset feelings, and holding those feelings as more important than stopping an active genocide. The propagandists and empire managers don't have facts on their side, and don't have morality on their side, so they attempt to manipulate by pulling on the heartstrings using sympathy and compassion. They appeal to some of the healthiest impulses within us in order to dupe us into supporting some of the most evil actions the world has ever seen. Which is an absolutely disgusting thing to do, naturally. But, again, it's all these freaks have left.
Well, of course, I had to take the time to talk about the recent report from Plus 972 and Local Call about the Lavender program, an artificial intelligence-based system which generates kill lists. I've read a lot of very upsetting material throughout this genocide taking place in the Gaza Strip. I've made a lot of videos about them. Though this one stands out as among the most chilling of reports that I have ever read in my entire life. You'll soon see why. The report is valuable in a number of ways, not least of which being its perfect debunking of the Israeli claim that the high number of civilian casualties in its massive bombing of the Gaza Strip is a result of Hamas using them as so-called human shields. I've not taken much time to address the Israeli human shields claim, since logically it was so stupid. Even granting, in theory, Hamas shelters under hospitals or refugee camps, and that's why Israel has to bomb them. Israel dropping enough bombs on this tiny enclave more than any bombing campaign of the current century.
Robert Pape is a professor of political science at the University of Chicago. You've studied extensively on the issue of coercive bombing.
I've studied every strategic bombing campaign since World War I. What I can tell you is that Israel's bombing campaign is one of the most intense civilian punishment campaigns in history. We are seeing one of the most intense civilian bombing campaigns in history.
Destroying it worse than World War II Germany obviously renders human shields completely meaningless. This is what I knew before reading the new report from 972 and Local Call. The reality, much to my surprise, is even worse. The article's author, Yuval Abraham, explains how the Israeli Defense Forces felt about 972 and Local Call's reporting. In a statement to 972 and Local Call, the IDF spokesperson claimed in response to this article that Hamas places its operatives and military assets in the heart of the civilian population, systematically uses the civilian population as human shields, and conducts fighting from within civilian structures, including sensitive sites such as hospitals, mosques, schools, and UN facilities. The IDF is bound by and acts according to international law, directing its attacks only at military targets and military operatives. However, in contrast to the Israeli army's official statements, sources explained that a major source for the unprecedented death toll from Israel's current bombardment is the fact that the army has systematically attacked targets in their private homes, alongside their families, in part because it was easier from an intelligence standpoint to mark family houses using automated systems. Aside from revealing the existence of Lavender, 972 and Local Call also unearthed a system Israeli forces use to trace Hamas officials to their private homes. You see, rather than making painstaking decisions about how many civilians to blow up when targeting a Hamas terrorist cowardly shielding himself in a school, the Israeli military has made the decision to go after targets in what can only be described as the most cowardly way possible, in the middle of the night when he's sleeping with his entire family. They call it "Where's Daddy?" We're not interested in killing Hamas operatives only when they were in a military building or engaged in a military activity, an intelligence officer told 972 and Local Call. On the contrary, the IDF bombed them in homes without hesitation as a first option. It's much easier to bomb a family's home. The system is built to look for them in these situations. Where's Daddy acted as a home tracking system. A explained the marked person would be placed under ongoing surveillance and could be attacked as soon as they set foot in their home, collapsing the house on everyone inside. Let's say you calculate that there is one Hamas operative plus 10 civilians in the house, A said. Usually these 10 will be women and children. So absurdly, it turns out that most of the people you killed were women and children. Checks out.
About how many Palestinian women and children have been killed by Israel since October 7th?
It's over 25,000.
According to another source in the story, B, a senior officer who used lavender, at 5 a.m., the Air Force would come and bomb all the houses that we had marked. We took out thousands of people. We didn't go through them one by one. We put everything into automated systems. Unsurprisingly, this surveillance of targets and tracing them to their homes was fundamentally flawed in a number of tragic ways. According to B, most of the mistakes caused by lavender occurred if the Hamas target gave his phone to his son, his older brother, or just a random man. That person will be bombed in his house with his family. This happened often. One source described a similar incident that affected him and made him want to be interviewed for this investigation. We understood that the target was home at 8 p.m. In the end, the Air Force bombed the house at 3 a.m. Then we found out in that span of time he had managed to move himself to another house with his family. There were 2 other families with children in the building we bombed. It happened to me many times that we attacked a house, but the person wasn't even home, one source said. The result is that you killed a family for no reason. The number of targets feverishly generated by officers seeking to pad their kill lists grew to as many as 37,000. People who, in theory, were to be bombed in their private residences, killing many more uninvolved and innocent women and children. Tens of thousands were generated by lowering the threshold for targeting used in previous Israeli massacres in the Gaza Strip, such as in 2008 and 9 and 2014. AI-generated targeting is a very recent phenomenon, and a model for the current onslaught in Gaza can be found in the widespread bombing of the Strip in 2021, what Israel dubbed Guardian of the Walls. The first digital war, in the words of Unit 8200 data science and AI commander Colonel Yoav. According to Yoav, who was speaking at the AI conference at Tel Aviv University, the IDF was able to target at least one of the Hamas squad missile commanders and one of the Hamas anti-tank missile units using data science and AI capabilities. In all, he said new digital methods helped produce 200 new target assets during the 10-day operation. With the technological developments brought by the 2021 bombing campaign and the Israeli bloodlust following October 7th, a drastic change in Israeli military policy would help produce the staggering and unprecedented casualty figures we see today. 972 and local call found. In the past, the military did not authorize any collateral damage during assassinations of low-ranking militants. In an unprecedented move, according to 2 of the sources, the army has decided during the first weeks of the war that for every junior Hamas operative that lavender marked, it was permissible to kill up to 15 or 20 civilians. What's worse, according to the sources, when it came to targeting alleged junior militants marked by lavender, the army preferred to only use unguided missiles, commonly known as dumb bombs, in contrast to smart precision bombs, which can destroy entire buildings on top of their occupants and cause significant casualties. You don't want to waste expensive bombs on unimportant people. It's very expensive for the country, and there's a shortage of those bombs, said C, one of the intelligence officers. Another source said that they had personally authorized the bombing of hundreds of private homes of alleged junior operatives marked by lavender, with many of these attacks killing civilians and entire families as collateral damage. It was very surprising for me that we were asked to bomb a house to kill a ground soldier, whose importance in the fighting was so low, said one source about the use of AI to mark alleged low-ranking militants. I nicknamed those targets garbage targets. Still, I found them more ethical than the targets that we bombed just for deterrence. High-rises that are evacuated and toppled just to cause destruction. This was reported by 972 and Local Call in November of 2023 in a bombshell article about the widespread use of a system called Habzora, or the Gospel. These bombings, which were intended solely to cause destruction, were aimed at private residences as well as public buildings, infrastructure, and high-rise blocks, which sources say the army defines as power targets. According to intelligence sources who had first-hand experience with its application in Gaza in the past, it is mainly intended to harm Palestinian civil society, to create a shock that, among other things, will reverberate powerfully and lead civilians to put pressure on Hamas, as one source put it. As opposed to Gospel's use in targeting structures and whole neighborhood blocks, Lavender, in conjunction with tracking technology like Where's Daddy, are used to place people on kill lists. Along with including simple junior officers who were to be killed in their homes with their families, the list also at times reportedly included children. Another source said even some minors were marked by Lavender as targets for bombing. Normally, operatives are over the age of 17, but that was not a condition. 972 and Local Call give a detailed account of the several weeks of chaos that marked the beginning of the Gaza genocide, though chaos has continued, albeit with different characteristics. Sources told 972 and Local Call that now, partly due to American pressure, the Israeli army is no longer mass-generating junior human targets for bombing in civilian homes. The fact that most homes in the Gaza Strip were already destroyed or damaged, and almost the entire population has been displaced, also impaired the Army's ability to rely on intelligence databases and automated house locating programs. Airstrikes against senior-ranking Hamas commanders are still ongoing, and sources said that for these attacks, the military is authorizing the killing of hundreds of civilians per target, an official policy for which there is no historical precedent in Israel or even in recent U.S. military operations. In the bombing of the commander of the Shujaa battalion, we knew that we would kill over 100 civilians. B recalled of a December 2nd bombing. In order to assassinate Ayman Nofal, the commander of Hamas's Central Gaza Brigade, a source said that the army authorized the killing of approximately 300 civilians, destroying several buildings and airstrikes on Al-Bureij refugee camp on October 17th. Though the Israeli military, again in a deviation from its conduct in previous bloodbaths in Gaza, have not even taken the trouble to accurately tally their killed. Indeed, in years past, after bombing targets slated for assassination, Israeli intelligence would typically carry out a bomb damage assessment, a routine post-strike check to see if the senior commander was killed and how many civilians were killed along with them. This reportedly involved listening in to phone calls of relatives who lost their loved ones. But this time round, sources say this procedure was abolished in order to save time. The sources said they did not know how many civilians were actually killed in each strike, and for the low-ranking suspected Hamas and PIG operatives marked by AI, they did not even know whether the target himself was killed. You don't know exactly how many you killed and who you killed, an intelligence source told Local Call. Only when it's senior Hamas operatives do you follow the BDA procedure. In the rest of the cases, you don't care. You get a report from the Air Force about whether the building was blown up, and that's it. You have no idea how much collateral damage there was. You immediately move on to the next target. The emphasis was to create as many targets as possible, as quickly as possible. And this is precisely why the Israeli military has itself relied almost exclusively on data from the Palestinian Health Ministry in Gaza, what all Western news essentially calls the Hamas-run health ministry. They have reproduced these figures in celebration of their perceived successes, writes UN Special Rapporteur for Human Rights in the Occupied Territories Francesca Albanese in her recent searing report, Anatomy of a Genocide. 70% of recorded deaths have consistently been women and children. Israel failed to prove that the remaining 30%, i.e. adult males, were active Hamas combatants, a necessary condition for them to be lawfully targeted. By early December, Israel's security advisors claimed the killing of 7,000 terrorists. in a stage of the campaign when less than 5,000 adult males in total had been identified among the casualties, thus implying that all adult males killed were terrorists. This is indicative of an intent to indiscriminately target members of the protected group, assimilating them to active fighter status by default. Albanese further provides data which serves to substantiate the lethal targeting programs employed by Israel in Gaza. 70% of residential areas have been destroyed. Since October 7th, Israel has killed over 30,000 Palestinians in Gaza. By the end of February, a further 12,000 Palestinians were reported missing, presumed dead under the rubble. Indeed, any argument in favor of human shields suffers in light of the simply stated fact, stated in one cruel sentence of Francesca Albanese's report, that after 5 months of military operations, Israel has destroyed Gaza. Surely another source of the astronomical casualties was the bombing of areas officially deemed by Israel to be safe from bombing. Of the roughly 500 2,000-pound bombs dropped by Israel in the first 6 weeks of hostilities, Albanese writes, 42% were deployed in the designated safe zones in southern areas. As a result, by October 28th, 2 weeks after Israel's mass evacuation order, about 38% of killings in Gaza occurred in the declared safe zones. By January 22nd, 42% were located in the area, which by then held the majority of the Gaza population. Simply put, safe areas were deliberately turned into areas of mass killing. A report published in late March by UNICEF Education Cluster and Save the Children further substantiated the targeting of these so-called safe areas. They sadly report that of the 563 school buildings in Gaza, 212 have been directly hit by bombs. 165 of those were in areas designated for evacuation by the Israeli military. Just days after October 7th, the Jerusalem Post reported that IDF Air Force Chief Brigadier General Omer Tischler said the IDF is not targeting civilians as Hamas did in mass numbers on Saturday and continues to do with rocket fire. There is always a military target, but we are not being surgical. Tactically, he explained that if in past rounds of fighting with Gaza, the Air Force would target 1 or 2 Hamas or Palestinian Islamic Jihad targets or high-ranking officers at a time, now it is targeting whole neighborhoods of terrorist targets all at once. So, targeting not only senior Hamas commanders, but also simple junior officers, killing entire families, bombing civilian infrastructure just to instill fear in the population, bombing the south of Gaza despite designating it a safe zone, renders the argument of human shield so asinine that it's barely worthy of any mention at all. But what makes it even more utterly stupid is that the deaths and the conditions calculated to bring about those deaths are by no means limited to those bombings, but also starvation as well. A deliberate policy which by definition does not distinguish between military or civilian, man or woman, woman or child. It is a purely indiscriminate civilian punishment measure calculated to bring about death to the whole of the population. In other words, genocide. As Albanese sadly reports, Israel's heightened blockade of Gaza has caused death by starvation, including 10 children daily by impeding access to vital supplies. A report from Oxfam sheds light on the, as they put it plainly, deliberate restrictive actions that have led to a severe and systemic dysfunctionality in the delivery of aid. The conditions we have observed in Gaza are beyond catastrophic, and we have not only seen failure by Israeli authorities to meet their responsibility to facilitate and support international aid efforts, but in fact seen active steps being taken to hinder and undermine such aid efforts. Examples include, on December 21st, an Israeli airstrike targeted the Kerem Abu Salem border crossing area in southern Gaza, killing the director responsible for coordinating humanitarian aid entry. This attack not only disrupted the critical flow of aid, but also raised concerns over violations of international humanitarian law, which mandates the protection of humanitarian personnel. The Karim Abu Salem crossing has much wider capacity to scan and process cargo, but Israeli authorities have not made it fully operational. The Eretz crossing remains closed, making it impossible to reach North Gaza without having to cross the entire strip under constant Israeli bombing. Of course, I've reported here before, including in December, Human Rights Watch describing the Israeli government using starvation of civilians as a method of warfare in the Gaza Strip, which is a war crime. That Israeli forces are deliberately blocking the delivery of water, food, and fuel. Just in November 2023, the UN Office for the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs reported 7 water facilities across the Gaza Strip were directly hit and sustained major damage, including 3 sewage pipelines in Gaza City, 2 water reservoirs, and 2 water wells. Euromed Human Rights Monitor had themselves reported, also in November, that the Israeli war of starvation has taken very dangerous turns, including cutting off all food supplies to the northern half and bombing and destroying factories, bakeries, food stores, water stations, and tanks throughout the entire enclave. Speaking of Euromed Monitor, they actually released a new report just days ago, which has apparently not been reported on widely. The apt title reads, "Killing Starving Palestinians, Targeting Aid Trucks is a Deliberate Israeli Policy to Reinforce Famine in the Gaza Strip." They detail numerous instances of Israel targeting aid convoys, those waiting for aid, and officials responsible for overseeing not only its distribution, but also guarding convoys to avoid looting. Examples that can hardly be attributed to Hamas using human shields. The situation has gotten so dire, Euromed Monitor write, that between January 11th and March 23rd, 2024, Euromed Monitor documented the killing of 563 Palestinians and the injury of 1,523 others due to the Israeli army's targeting of people waiting for aid, distribution centers, and those responsible for organizing, protecting, and distributing aid in the Gaza Strip. Evidence suggests that Israel intentionally perpetrates these crimes, including direct military attacks on humanitarian aid and civilians, as part of a deliberate and overarching policy. This is evident from the systematic pattern and regular, almost daily recurrence of Israel's commission of these crimes, as well as the high number of victims affected by them. They provide an exhaustive timeline. These are among the most noteworthy examples provided in the report, which I'll include here. On targeting starving civilians waiting for humanitarian aid, on January 11th, 2024, the Israeli army killed approximately 50 Palestinians and wounded dozens of others when quadcopter aircraft opened fire on Palestinian crowds who had gathered to receive quantities of flour loaded by UN trucks on Al-Rashid Street in west of Gaza City. On January 22nd, the Israeli army fired artillery shells at hundreds of hungry civilians who had gathered on Salah al-Din Road in southeast of Gaza City. February 25th, 10 Palestinians were killed and 20 others injured after being targeted by Israeli army forces while waiting for aid trucks near the Nablusi roundabout on Al-Rashid Street in the southwest of Gaza City. On February 29th, 118 people were killed and 760 others injured on Al-Rashid Street south of Gaza City while waiting for aid supplies. The Euromed Monitor field team documented the brutal Israeli massacre of Palestinians, confirming that Israeli tanks opened fire and shells at around 4:30 a.m. directly into a crowd of thousands of hungry civilians. The civilians had been waiting hours for aid trucks to arrive near the Nablusi roundabout on Al-Rashid Street. On March 2nd, 1 Palestinian was killed and more than 20 others injured after being targeted while waiting for aid supplies at Al-Rashid Street in March 3rd. Several people were killed and injured after being shot while waiting for aid supplies at the Kuwait roundabout in Gaza City. On March 9th, at least 2 Palestinians were killed and 18 others injured when Israeli army forces targeted crowds of people waiting for aid at the Kuwait and Nablus roundabouts. On March 11th, 9 Palestinians were killed and others injured after Israeli army forces opened fire at those waiting for aid trucks at the Kuwait roundabout southeast of Gaza City. On March 13th, 6 Palestinians were killed and others injured while waiting for aid supplies to arrive at the Kuwait roundabout on the outskirts of Gaza. On March 14th, Israeli army forces opened heavy fire on thousands of civilians who had gathered near the Kuwait roundabout at the Salah al-Din road in southern Gaza City using tanks, helicopters, and drones. The shooting left more than 80 dead and 200 injured, with a number of them left in critical condition. The next morning, Israeli army forces opened fire on residents who returned to the scene in an attempt to retrieve the bodies of the victims. Additionally, Euromed write, Israel has targeted humanitarian aid distribution centers, including on February 7th, when 13 Palestinians were killed and several others injured when a water distribution truck was bombed in Gaza City as people gathered to fill their water barrels. On March 13th, Israeli aircraft bombed the UNRWA-run humanitarian aid distribution headquarters in the administrative district of Rafah while employees were distributing flour to the residents. The bombing killed 6 civilians, including a child and an UNRWA employee, and injured several others, including 22 UNRWA employees. On March 14th, Israeli aircraft bombed an aid distribution center run by the Ministry of Social Development in the Nusrat refugee camp in the central Gaza Strip, killing 8 people and wounding several. On March 18th, Israeli aircraft bombed an aid storage and distribution center east of Jabalia refugee camp in North Gaza Governorate, killing 2 people working in aid distribution. There's also targeting humanitarian aid convoys. On February 5th, Israeli forces bombed an UNRWA aid convoy heading toward northern Gaza in Deir al-Bala in the middle of the Strip, despite pre-coordinating with parties to the conflict. On February 5th, again, an aid convoy came under heavy Israeli fire while heading to northern Gaza. No casualties were reported, according to the deputy humanitarian coordinator. On March 3rd, 2 Israeli missiles bombed an aid truck in Deir al-Bala, killing 9 civilians and wounding others, including civilians gathered around it. When it comes to targeting workers distributing humanitarian aid, on January 21st, an Israeli warplane bombed a car carrying government employees responsible for coordinating aid entry, killing 3 people, including Ahmed Jamal Abu Mansour, head of the Emergency Committee of the Ministry of Social Development. On February 20th, an Israeli drone bombed a civilian car west of the Shabura refugee camp in Rafah, killing. On March 13th, an Israeli drone bombed a civilian car in the Kerba al-Adas neighborhood in Rafah. On March 18th, 2 aid distribution workers were killed when Israeli aircraft targeting an aid storage center east of Jabalia camp in northern Gaza. On March 19th, the Israeli army killed the director of the Emergency Committee in western Gaza at the Kuwait roundabout in Gaza City while he was supervising aid entry and distribution. Regarding targeting those responsible for securing and protecting humanitarian. On March 18th, 2024, the director of the Nusrat police station, Mahmoud al-Bayoumi, was killed in an Israeli bombing that targeted a car in front of the UNRWA headquarters in Nusrat in the central Gaza Strip. 3 civilians were killed in the attack, including 2 young sisters. On the evening of the same day, the Israeli army killed 30 members of the police and civilian committees charged with protecting aid trucks in an Israeli bombing near the Kuwait roundabout in southern Gaza City. This is part of Israel's policy of clearing the way for the looting of humanitarian aid and exacerbating the famine. On January 9th, the Israeli army opened heavy gunfire at a group of police officers as they attempted to secure the entry of humanitarian supplies into Gaza City. Many of them were killed and injured during the incident. On February 6th, 6 Palestinian police officers were killed when a police vehicle guarding an aid truck was bombed in the Kerbat al-Adha. The Israeli army killed Fayek al-Mabou, director of Central Police Operations. The Israeli army also killed Lieutenant Colonel Raed al-Bana, along with his wife and children, after bombing his house on March 18th. Al-Bana was responsible for securing the entry of aid trucks into northern Gaza. Of course, they felt compelled to address Israel's attempts to evade responsibility for the massacres. Regarding the most well-known and deadliest flour massacre at the Nablus roundabout in the southwest of Gaza City on February 29th, Euromed Human Rights Monitor confirmed full Israeli involvement in the crime. Many victims of the massacre suffered injuries from 5.56 NATO bullets. This is a type of bullet fired from Israeli army weapons. A sample of 200 dead and injured victims revealed that they were indeed hit by this type of bullet, which was discovered and examined at the massacre site. These, simply put, were clearly just people, human beings and not simply something that can so easily be written off as human shields.
Israel's shared values with the West are tyranny, war, and genocide. Notes from the edge of the narrative matrix. British journalist Richard Medhurst reports that on Thursday he was arrested and treated as a terrorism suspect for the expression of political opinion under Section 12 of the UK's Terrorism Act. As Consortium News explains, under this law, one can be prosecuted if the accused, quote, invites support for a prescribed organization or, quote, expresses an opinion or belief that is supportive of a prescribed organization, meaning any group the British government says are terrorists. Every part of this is a horrifying assault on press freedoms and freedom of expression. Axios headline: Hamas rejects new U.S. proposal for Gaza hostage and ceasefire deal. 7 paragraphs down. Specifically, Hamas objects to the fact that the proposal doesn't include a permanent ceasefire. So, Hamas rejected a ceasefire because it wasn't a ceasefire, at least not in any way that matters to people who want the killing to end. For months on end, Israel and its Western spinmeisters have been exploiting the fact that ceasefire can mean a temporary pause in the genocide, in a way that allows them to keep framing Hamas as rejecting a peace deal, when really they just want a permanent end to the killing. No normal human being is asking for a temporary pause in Israel's genocide. That is literally never, ever what anyone means when they call for a ceasefire. But these pedantic word games are being used to obfuscate the reality that Israel and its Western backers want the genocide to continue. It's maddening how the Biden administration has spent 10 months going, well, golly gosh, we're doing everything we can to stop the fighting in Gaza. Gee willikers, diplomacy is hard, while single-handedly making this genocide possible. Literally all they'd have to do is stop supplying it. Israel is a murderous, tyrannical, psychopathic regime. So is the Western Empire. So when Westerners talk about having shared values with Israel, they're not actually lying. Israel has spent 10 months proving its biggest critics 100% correct about it, and proving that everything Israel's supporters have said to disparage those critics was a 100% bogus smear campaign. And yet they'll still try to call you an anti-Semite for criticizing Israel. Nothing I say here should ever be taken as a suggestion that you should vote any particular way or not vote at all. That is never, ever what I'm doing here. What I'm doing is using the US election to highlight the contradictions and abuses of the empire and the futility of using electoral politics to address them. Vote or don't vote in whatever way you want. No matter who you vote for, you'll get tyranny, war, and genocide. Vote for Harris, and you'll get tyranny, war, and genocide. Vote for Trump, and you'll get tyranny, war, and genocide. Vote for Kennedy, and you'll get tyranny, war, and genocide. Don't want tyranny, war, and genocide? Go ahead and try to elect someone like Jill Stein or Cornel West who stands against tyranny, war, and genocide. But have no doubt that the system is rigged to prevent that from succeeding, and you'll get a president who stands with tyranny, war, and genocide. Tyranny, war, and genocide is all you get to elect, so vote however you want in your fake performative election. Is the guy with the boot on his head running this year? Vote for him if you want. I don't care.
So, James Carville had been, giving some tough love to the Democrats when Biden was the nominee. And now I guess the Kamala's the nominee and that Tim Walz is the vice presidential nominee. Maybe he's feeling a little bit more confident, a little more combative, a little more eager to bring the fight to the Republicans. So we all know, Tim Walz, one of his nicknames that the right has given him is Tampon Tim, because he's put tampons in gender-neutral bathrooms in public schools in Minnesota. And so that's a big meme thing. So James Carville has a retort to this, and the tweeter here put an extreme language warning. Maybe extreme for some people, not extreme for us, the most depraved audience on YouTube, but here's James Carville's response to the Tampon Tim moniker.
Governor Tim has called them weird, and that doesn't nearly describe this. So I have a message to Jesse and of the whole freak show is, why don't you take a tampon and shove it right up your ass? Because that's where it goes, right up your ass. Or maybe you could stick it in your mouth, and maybe you could take a used one and stick it in your mouth and suck on it, because that's what you do. You suck. Thank you, and good night.
Watch that again.
I hadn't seen that. I was not literally expecting James Carville to start promoting ATM. Not see that coming.
Not see that coming. Wow.
Well, that's the power of the Israel lobby, AIPAC in particular. So our Congress is bought and paid for and has been for decades. Biden, by the way, took more money from the Israel lobby than any other Senate candidate. I think he still holds that record, and he hasn't been in the Senate for I guess, 12 years. 8 years as a vice president, and more than that, and then almost 4 years as president. So, they're bought and paid for, and they were cheering their major funder, in essence, or the Israeli prime minister, who their major funder has long supported. AIPAC, by the way, has a very strong political orientation, I know, because I covered the election between Rabin and Netanyahu, and AIPAC funded and supported Netanyahu through PACs and advisors and everything else. So there's long been a political orientation, especially after Oslo, and Netanyahu is hand in glove with the Israel lobby. He's a creation of the Israel lobby, really, in essence, as a political candidate. And the deep pockets that the Israel lobby has allows it to essentially buy up the American political class. And so that's why you saw everybody standing and cheering a war criminal. I mean, it was a kind of deeply embarrassing and sobering sight, but I think it also illustrates to what an extent the United States has become a pariah, along with Israel. The fact that you would invite someone who is being investigated as a war criminal, it's not just a term throwing out, he's being investigated by the International Court of Justice as a war criminal, so that they would invite him, it just shows you how checked out both Israel and the United States have become from the global community.
Harris says far too many civilians have been killed in genocide she supports. Far too many children have been eaten by hyenas, the politician sobbed to the news camera while lowering more children into the hyena pit. Finally, a candidate who cares deeply about those poor children who keep getting killed by hyenas, said Sally, turning up the volume on the television. What do you mean? She's literally lowering those children into the hyena pit while she says that, Phil objected. Okay. But have you seen what the other candidate is saying? Sally replied. He says it's good that the children are being eaten. It's such a sad and tragic tragedy, the politician on TV shouted over the sound of screaming children. We urgently need to get to the bottom of this problem. Look, she just called it a tragedy, said Sally. The other candidate doesn't think it's sad or tragic at all. But the end result is the same, Phil exclaimed in exasperation. In both cases, the children are being killed. But when she kills them, she's acting sad about it. She's not killing the children, the hyenas are, objected Sally. Blame them. Yeah, but the hyenas couldn't kill the children without her help, Phil retorted. Well, the hyenas have a right to eat, said Sally. What are you, anti-wildlife? Oh my God, you always accuse me of hating all wildlife when I object to our government's policy of feeding children to hungry hyenas kept in a pit that was constructed for that specific purpose. Okay, well then if you're not anti-wildlife, I don't understand why you're so fixated on this one specific issue, Phil. There are other issues like reproductive rights, fiscal policy, and immigration reform you could be focusing on. But all you want to talk about is this small pit of hyenas which our government officials happen to lower a cage full of children into every morning. Well, maybe I don't feel comfortable supporting anyone who's going to feed children to hyenas at all, regardless of what words they happen to be saying about it and what emotions they happen to be expressing while doing so. Look, Phil, she's just making hard choices within the framework of the political realities of our day. If she stopped feeding children to the hyenas altogether, the hyena lobby would never let her become president. Well, then maybe that's the problem, Sally. Maybe the problem is that we have a system that only lets us choose between politicians who want to feed children to hyenas. Maybe we should be fighting the fact that powerful interest groups exert so much control over our electoral and government systems that they can force the advancement of extremely depraved agendas with no accountability to the electorate, instead of fighting over which child killer we should be electing to lower children into the hyena pit.
Fans have gathered around Morehouse. They're waiting for the chimney smoke